Why you must listen. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, Learn with Mark. Today we're going to talk about why you must listen. Let's get started. Identify objects around you in English. The first way to stop translating in your head is to identify the objects around you in your target language. So if you're studying English, that means you look at the objects around the room. Look at the things in your life. Don't think of them in your native language first. Think of them in your target language first. So if I look around the room and see a computer, I shouldn't think my native language word. I should think my target language word. So start with the items and the situations in your everyday life. If I say computer in English, maybe I should say computer in Japanese. I should say not, I don't know water in English. I should say omizu in Japanese. So start associating the words in your target language with your everyday life now. So if you're studying English, that means start getting familiar with the things in your everyday life in English. Repeat phrases you hear native speakers use. Tip number 2 is to repeat the phrases that you hear native speakers use. So if you're watching this channel, for example, or you're watching a TV show or a movie, listen for the way that native speakers make those phrases. If you hear a phrase you have never heard before, or you hear an interesting combination of words, try to repeat them yourself. Don't just listen. Try to say them yourself. If you're in a public space and it's difficult for you to do that, fine. Practice in a place where you feel more comfortable. Maybe if you have some private space to practice, just repeat them. Get your mouth used to saying the words the way that the native speakers do. If you never actually say words, if you're only taking in, if you're only listening, and you're not actually producing the language, it's kind of hard to practice and to really hone your pronunciation to improve your pronunciation. So when you listen to native speakers, try to repeat after them. So, for example, if you're studying English, you can try to repeat after this video. You can repeat after the things I'm saying because maybe I'm using an expression or I'm using a series of vocabulary words together the way a native speaker would. And it's maybe a good idea to try to practice the ways that native speakers put their words together. So try to repeat after native speakers, especially when you're looking at media. You can do this when you're reading books too. You can try to read out loud interesting lines of books that you find or something that maybe is difficult for you. Very nice practice tip. Make a situation where you can't escape into your native language. Making a situation where you can't escape into your native language essentially means immersing yourself. Of course, going to that country or going to a place where you can speak only that language is very difficult for some of you. Totally understand. But if in your life you can create a situation in your library, in your room, in your house, somewhere for just an hour or, I don't know, maybe a day. I don't know what your schedule is like, but if you can create a situation or create an environment where you have no choice but to use that language and you cannot escape, meaning you cannot go back to using your native language as a crutch, you can't use the native language at all, it forces you to use the language that you're studying. So of course, if you are lucky enough to live in the country or to live in a place where people speak the language you're studying, great. But you have to go out and interact with people. You have to put yourself in a place where you have no choice but to speak. It's very hard, and it's very scary, and it's very embarrassing at first. But if you take time to find places and to make environments that are comfortable for you, where you feel comfortable making mistakes and asking questions, it's very valuable for your learning process. This is actually something that I did totally. I totally did this. My Japanese wasn't very good for a long time, but then I started making friends who could not speak English. Actually, I just did this through finding hobbies. There was a hobby that I had. I joined a group. I joined actually a school where I could learn how to do that hobby, and everything was taught only in Japanese. The people in my class only spoke Japanese, mostly. And then maybe we would go out for drinks and food late at night or on the weekends, and everybody spoke only Japanese. If I couldn't communicate even simply in Japanese, I had no hope of keeping that friendship together. So it forced me to study. It forced me to think about the words they were using and to try to learn those words, those patterns, as well as how to produce them naturally myself. So I was learning the vocabulary words that people around me were using and learning how to apply them on my own. That was only possible because I had no escape in those situations. So try to do that, even if you can do it yourself in your house. It's super helpful, I think. Watch TV and movies in your target language without subtitles. Tip number 4 is to watch TV and movies in your target language without subtitles. So I think that watching with subtitles can be very beneficial. So if I'm watching something, or if you want to watch something with subtitles on, great. But I sometimes find that I can, in my case, I think too much about reading the subtitles, and I forget to listen. So maybe if you've seen a movie in your target language a few times with the subtitles on, try turning the subtitles off and think about the character's body language, the words they're using. You can always look that up later. Look up the words you don't know in a diary. But try to do it where you're focusing completely on the way that people are using their words. Try not to use the subtitles. So kind of play around with it a little bit. If there's a word that's difficult for you to hear, you can actually turn on the subtitles in the native language of the movie as well. That's something that I've done. Like, if I wanted to study Japanese, it's very useful when the actual words spoken in Japanese appear on the screen. Sometimes it's easier for me to catch a word if I see it visually and I hear it at the same time. So another way to explore how you can use TV and movies is to actually turn on the closed captions. Like the words on the screen, in the native language of the movie. So this is sort of 2 points in one. 1. Watch movies without subtitles, meaning subtitles in your native language. And hint 2 is to watch movies with closed captioning on, but the closed captioning is in your target language, not in your native language. So you can try those 2 things with TV and with movies. Don't bring a dictionary to your lesson. Tip number 5 is don't bring a dictionary to your lesson. Okay, so give me a second here. So I understand that dictionaries, especially electronic dictionaries, we have them on our phones now, are very, very convenient. Of course, it's important to use them, and they're a great resource to have. However, one thing that really bothers me and that I think is detrimental, is not helpful for students, is when students are in a lesson and they're practicing conversation. And they reach a point in the conversation where they don't know the word they want to use. They know it in their native language, and they don't know how to say it in their target language. They pull out their dictionary, they say to the person listening to them, their practice partner in their lesson, where they have a limited period of time, just a moment, and then they look it up on their phone. It takes a few seconds. The flow of the conversation stops, and then they say a word. It's like, who know? You don't have that ability. You don't have the ability to do that in a conversation with a native speaker. Most people, Like if you go to a bank and try to open a bank account, are you really going to pull out your dictionary and sit there and try to communicate? Just a moment, as you look up each word you don't know. No, no. Or if you do, that's not a real conversation. So instead, try using a different strategy. By that I mean if you find a word you don't know in conversation, explain the word to your conversation partner. Maybe they know the word. If you're speaking with a native speaker, this is a chance for them to teach you a word. I find that when people take the time to teach me a word, I remember the word much better than just looking it up in my dictionary. So try to resist. Maybe you can bring a dictionary to your lesson, but don't use it, or try not to use it in your conversation practice. It destroys the flow of a conversation. So instead, practice the skill of describing the vocabulary word you want to use, and learn how to ask the meaning of a word or learn how to ask for a vocabulary word from your partner. So you can use an expression like, "What's the word that means blah blah blah?" Or, "It's this thing that does this and this and this." So this is an opportunity for you to describe characteristics of something or find a different way. You can use your body language. You can use whatever you have. A lot of tools. But try not to use a dictionary in a conversation because it's not realistic. Train responses to common questions. Number 6 is a quick one, I think. Number 6 hint I have is just to train responses to common questions. So for example, a very common question in English is, "Hey, how are you?" You should know how to answer this question because you will hear this question a lot. So you should just train yourself to respond to these kinds of questions so that it becomes very natural. Hey, how are you? I'm fine, thanks, and you? So try to get these responses down to the point where you don't have to think about them at all. Another example, if you're traveling somewhere, is to say, "Excuse me, where is the station?" If you want to ask for directions, or if you want to say thank you to someone, "Oh, thank you very much for your help." Those kinds of things. Those questions that you hear and that you want to ask again and again. So train yourself to respond to these quickly. You can practice in front of the mirror. You can practice with your friends. Get to the point where it's just no problem at all for you to respond. Reviens, reviens, reviens. Finally, tip number 7 is review, review, review. I understand it's very boring to review material. But if you spend a lot of time on vocabulary or you spend a lot of time practicing grammar, whatever it is you're doing, you have to review it. So if you are doing flashcards, it's good to review the vocabulary you learned that week. Or if you studied grammar in one of these videos, review the grammar in the video you learned. Try to check it a few days later. Try to review the things that you studied so that you don't forget it, because if you spend, an hour learning something new, and then you never review it, you've lost that hour. You didn't actually learn something new, you just forgot it. So take the time to review something you learned. Take the time to check your notes, check your flashcards, look over your textbook again, whatever it is you're using to study. Be sure to review. So those are my 7 tips to help you stop translating in your head. I hope that they were useful. If you have any other ideas, please feel free to leave it in a comment below this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and give this video a like. I hope it was helpful for you. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.